The Pokemon Scarlet Violet subreddit, accessed via r/PokemonScarletViolet, was created February 27th, 2022 in preparation for the release of the newest games in the Pokemon franchise, Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet, which were released for the Nintendo Switch on November 18th, 2022. The Pokemon community, like many other online gaming communities, has been using Reddit as a platform for digital interaction for years now. There exists a multitude of other subreddits for different topics and groups within the Pokemon franchise, whether it be for other Pokemon video games, trading card collecting, online battling with cards or video games, other Pokemon services. There is a subreddit for every niche a participant can think of. For the purposes of this report, the Pokemon Scarlet Violet subreddit will be the main focus. Due to the variety of this community, it's easy for casual participants to get overwhelmed by the intricacies in language and terms used by veteran community members. Most of the jargon found in the Pokemon Scarlet Violet subreddit is parallel to that of other Pokemon subreddits made up of Pokemon game mechanics like trading and hatching eggs, Pokemon culture and history, like different Pokemon region names and Pokemon names themselves, and technical aspects of Pokemon, like battle stats, items, shiny Pokemon, etc. One could argue that the Pokemon Scarlet Violet subreddit is a subgroup of the Pokemon subreddit as a whole, but within the Pokemon Scarlet Violet subreddit, there are two specialty megathreads, which are the closest example of subgroups within the subreddit I could find. Both of these megathreads are refreshed weekly, and these are the Trade megathread and the Shiny Pokemon megathread. The Shiny Pokemon megathread is where community members can share pictures and screenshots of their favorite shiny Pokemon. For context, shiny Pokemon are different colored variations of regular Pokemon. They tend to spawn in-game pretty randomly and pretty rarely, and their stats don't usually differ from typical Pokemon, they're just seen as like a cool aesthetic difference. The Trade megathread is the one that I personally have participated in. In this thread, community members who play Pokemon Scarlet or Pokemon Violet can connect with other players and virtually trade Pokemon from one game to another. In my opinion, this is one of the most integral core aspects of what makes the Pokemon community so inherently digital. Let me show you what I mean. The franchise's signature motto, "Gotta catch 'em all," is iconic to nearly everyone familiar with Pokemon. Ever since the release of Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue, both released in North America in 1998, the phrase has been present on the game's art and has served as the game's main goal of catching all the Pokemon in the world and logging them in the virtual Pokédex for further study, in order to understand Pokemon and become the ultimate Pokemon master. However, since the game's release, the goal of catching them all has been made impossible for one singular player. The release of a new Pokemon generation yields two games at initial release. Over the years, this is what the timeline has looked like. In 1996, Red and Blue. In 1999, Gold and Silver. 2002, Ruby and Sapphire. 2006, Diamond and Pearl. 2010, Black and White. 2013, X and Y. 2016, Sun and Moon. 2019, Sword and Shield. And 2022, Scarlet Violet. Each generation comes with new Pokemon to be introduced, but some Pokemon are exclusive to one game in each pair. They're still possible to obtain in each game, because their Pokédex entries exist in both games, but they require trading with a player that has the other corresponding game, or legally buying them online, but you didn't hear it from me. So, for anyone who subscribes to the original goal of gotta catch 'em all, they are forced to interact with someone else who has the version of Pokemon that contains their desired pocket monster, and hope they're willing to trade. In addition, some Pokemon only evolve when they're traded too, which requires another party to facilitate. Earlier generations required prospective trading partners to be in physical contact, using an actual cable or hardware, like the Game Link cable or GBA wireless adapter, to connect their devices. At the time, that was either the Game Boy or Game Boy Advance. From Generation 4 and onwards, technology has allowed players to trade with each other wirelessly via the Global Trade System, or the GTS, which was introduced with the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection feature made available for the Nintendo DS and the Nintendo Wii in 2005. Because features like the GTS made it so that players no longer had to be in physical contact with each other to trade, online platforms like Reddit have become a staple for members in the Pokemon community for trading and ultimately finding like-minded people with common interests. Personally, I find that the easy methods of trading are what bring a lot of players to the subreddit in the first place. I have a lot of people in my life who enjoy Pokemon and with whom I can talk about it. However, with a metric ton of different Pokemon games and remakes released, spanned across 9 different generations now, we are rarely at the same point in any given game to make us trade compatible. So, when it comes to trying to complete my Pokédex in a particular game, in this case it's Pokemon Scarlet, places like the Pokemon subreddit are the easiest ways to find other players across the world who have the Pokemon I need. Pokemon holds a special place in my heart because I grew up watching my brothers play their DSs and learned all they were willing to teach me for when I started my own game, much to their annoyance. We watched the Pokemon anime together and collected thousands of cards for years. I grew up on Pokemon knowledge, what moves have which effects, how to type match to make my attack super effective, when to heal up, when to run, where certain Pokemon appear, and how to beat the next Pokemon gym. It didn't matter at the time that I was younger or that I wasn't a boy. I still knew enough to hold my own in Pokemon battles. In the year 2000, Game Freak released an additional game to supplement Pokemon Gold and Pokemon Silver, the pre-existing second-generation games. The release of Pokemon Crystal brought the first Pokemon game to give the player a choice between a male or female trainer. While the female avatar was basically just the male avatar in shorter shorts with a different pose, it was widely received as a nice addition to the franchise and made female fans a little more comfortable playing in the Pokemon universe. That being said, the Pokemon game's dialogue didn't really differ based on the player's chosen gender. Most notably, the Pokemon professor you first meet will call you either my boy or my girl, depending on which one you choose. But other than that, most NPCs don't care what your pronouns are, they just want to Pokemon battle you. If we're talking about how this community exists in the social status quo, I believe it's this environment of relative acceptance regardless of gender that attracts a diverse group of players who aren't just cishet men. I believe that over the years, the Pokemon community has cultivated this view that each trainer brings their own style and knowledge to the battle, and that we all have something to learn and something to teach. I'm not saying that Pokemon is the ultimate gender-neutral gaming experience, because it isn't, and there's quite a bit wrong with the inherent sexism in the franchise that stems from the video game industry being skewed in favor of one demographic, but that's not what this is about. A thought that I did have about the status quo and the trade megathread specifically was that trading networks like these can be seen as a subtle pushback against the capitalism of the game release schedule. As I've said before, each generation yields 2 Pokemon games, with version exclusives. And before this, if you couldn't find anyone else with the desired Pokemon game, you'd probably have to resign to buying the other game for yourself. And it's not really worth it because the storyline is the same, it's just different color scheme, different Pokemon appearances. So there isn't a solid conclusion as to whether or not Nintendo or Game Freak did this on purpose so as to get more money, or to force players to seek human connection when looking for trading partners, but I think that online forums like Reddit offer a free and easy way to connect with others. I joined the community for the trade network, but I stayed for the people and the memes. Something I learned was how to trade safely online. The way Pokemon trading works for Scarlet and Violet is you access the online trading portal in the game, input a trading code, and search for possible trade partners. On the subreddit, you can organize specific codes to correspond to you and your trading partner so that you can easily find each other. However, the subreddit makes a note to try to avoid posting your trade code on the public forum and instead DM prospective trading partners privately. They suggest this so that no one else can see the trading code you set up and possibly swipe your Pokemon from you, since there's virtually no way to authenticate that a Pokemon player is in fact the same user you converse with on Reddit. Also, I learned that some people are really into Pokemon in different languages. I have a couple Pokemon that someone from Japan, I think, traded to me in a surprise trade, and their names come up in Japanese, which is pretty cool. I didn't previously know that there was a market for this kind of thing. Also, apparently there's a site where you can buy Pokemon for your game. I feel like I shouldn't be surprised at this point. You can tell if someone bought these Pokemon because their names all look like this. And if you go to that site, it's literally Amazon for Pokemon. I want it on record that this Pokemon was traded to me, and that I have never bought a Pokemon from the site because that's cheating. Unrelated to trading, the thing that I find the strangest for this subreddit in particular is the intense focus on showing off your shiny Pokemon. I don't really do much shiny hunting in my own games. They're too rare and way too much of an effort just for a cosmetic change. Most of them don't look too different from their regularly colored counterparts, but, some do. Also, maybe I'm just used to playing pixelated monochrome Pokemon games where you really can't tell if Pokemon is shiny or not. Again, the stats of the Pokemon don't change, it's just for aesthetics. I don't really see the point, personally. But it seems like some other community members are also sick of the sheer amount of shiny Pokemon pictures. I did do a quick overview of the Pokemon Sword and Shield, as well as the Pokemon Legends Arceus subreddits, because they're 2 of the most recent Pokemon games, other than Scarlet and Violet. And while neither of these subreddits immediately advertise a shiny Pokemon-specific mega thread, there's a fair amount of posts that flex shiny Pokemon, so I don't know, I guess it's a trend now. The logistics of studying this community further kind of depend on what exactly is being studied. As I've said before, the Pokemon community is a very diverse group of people, from all sorts of backgrounds, who enjoy Pokemon for a multitude of different reasons. Whether it's catching them to complete the Pokédex, battling to be the best, exploring all the regions, raising your own Pokemon, or literally anything else. If we were to focus on the trade megathread specifically from this subreddit, it's important to keep in mind that A, this is just one of the many platforms through which these exchanges happen, and therefore can't be evaluated as the only method of online Pokemon trading, and B, this is just one platform for just one of the many Pokemon games. I know that there exist Discord servers for this kind of thing as well, but since I'm not part of any, I'm not too familiar with any of the differences in function to this subreddit. Ethically, Reddit is a public domain, so collecting users' posts as raw data is relatively safe, I'm pretty sure. However, if further study required a more in-depth analysis of specific interactions on the subreddit, I would imagine anything like interviews with users would require some form of informed consent, and probably prior thought on how to handle any private information that's being exchanged.